In 1521, the Spanish Empire made it a crime to grow a grain. The punishment was amputation. 10,000 hectares were set on fire across the central valleys of Mexico. The crop was erased from colonial agriculture for 5 centuries. In 2025, that same grain grows in all 50 American states. It grows uninvited. It grows in soybean fields, in cotton fields, in corn fields. It resists every herbicide the chemical industry has created, including glyphosate. The USDA spends millions every year trying to destroy it. They call it Palmer amaranth. They call it pigweed. They call it a noxious weed. They do not call it what the Aztecs called it. They do not call it what it is: a complete protein, a cancer-preventive food, a grain that produces more nutrition per acre than wheat, with 60% less water. 2 empires, 500 years apart, both trying to kill the same plant. Neither one succeeded. This is amaranth, the grain they burned, the grain that grew back, the grain they still refuse to name. The archive opens in the Valley of Mexico, 1450. The city of Tenochtitlan sits on an island in the middle of a lake. It has a population of 200,000. It is larger than any city in Europe, larger than London, larger than Paris, larger than Seville. In the central courtyards of the Templo Mayor, statues stand as tall as men. They are not carved from stone. They are not cast from metal. They are made of grain, amaranth grain. The Aztecs called it huatli, mixed with honey and shaped by hand into the image of Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, the god of war, the god who demanded blood. These statues were called tuzoal. At the end of the ceremony, priests broke them apart. Pieces were distributed to the crowd. 200,000 people consumed the body of their god. Amaranth was not just food, it was communion. It was prayer made edible. It was the physical act of taking divinity into the body. The Aztec Empire codified amaranth as one of 3 mandatory tribute crops. From 17 provinces, human carriers walked 20 to 30 miles per day along stone causeways, delivering 20,000 tons of amaranth grain to the imperial granaries of Tenochtitlan every year. These granaries were called petlacali. Some historians estimate the total cultivated area exceeded 200,000 acres, more than any crop except maize. Amaranth was not a side dish. It was the second pillar of an empire. Then the Spanish arrived. Hernán Cortés landed at Veracruz in 1519 with 600 men and 16 horses. He found Totonac peoples cultivating amaranth alongside maize in Chinampas, floating gardens producing 7 tons per hectare. He watched the Tozoli ceremonies, he saw the blood, he saw the statues eaten, and he understood something that would shape the next 500 years of agriculture. This was not a grain, this was a religion, and you cannot conquer a religion by replacing it with wheat. You have to destroy it. In 1521, Spanish colonial authorities issued orders. Amaranth cultivation was banned. The penalty for planting it was having your hands severed. Fields were set on fire. Dominican friars documented the destruction. More than 10,000 hectares of amaranth burned across the central valleys of Mexico. Fields that had been yielding 2,000 kilograms per hectare were reduced to ash. This was not agriculture policy. This was cultural warfare. The Spanish understood that as long as the people could grow their god, they could not be fully conquered. So they erased the plant. And for 5 centuries, it worked. Almost amaranth survived. Not in fields, not in markets, not in colonial record books. It survived in the mountains, above 2,500 meters elevation, in Oaxaca, in Guerrero, in the highlands of Guatemala, in plots smaller than 1/10 of a hectare, hidden, unlabeled, passed from hand to hand by indigenous farmers who refused to let it die. The most powerful empire of the 16th century could not kill a plant that a single woman could hide in a mountain garden. Amaranth is not technically a grain. It is a pseudo-cereal, the seeds of a broadleaf plant in the family Amaranthaceae, not a grass like wheat, rice, or corn. This distinction matters because the nutritional profile of amaranth does not behave like a cereal. It behaves like something engineered. 100 grams of uncooked amaranth grain contains 13.6 grams of protein. That is higher than rice, higher than corn, comparable to wheat. But the protein in wheat is incomplete. It is deficient in lysine, the amino acid most critical for human tissue repair and immune function. Wheat contains approximately 2.8% lysine. Amaranth contains 5.2% lysine, the highest of any cereal or pseudo-cereal grain on record. Its essential amino acid index, a measure of how closely a protein matches the needs of the human body, scores 90.4%. That is almost identical to egg protein. Egg protein is the gold standard. Amaranth reaches it from a seed that grows in dirt. 100 grams contains 7.6 milligrams of iron. That is 95% of your daily recommended value. From a single serving of a plant the USDA calls a weed. 159 milligrams of calcium, 508 milligrams of potassium, 248 milligrams of magnesium. Manganese at 145% of the daily value. And then there is squalene. Amaranth seed oil contains approximately 8% squalene, a lipid compound most commonly extracted from shark liver at enormous environmental cost. Squalene is used in cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and vaccine adjuvants. It is also the subject of ongoing cancer research. A 2024 study published in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences found that amaranth squalene demonstrated protective effects against UV-induced skin damage and showed inhibitory activity against tumor cell growth. But squalene is not the most interesting compound in amaranth. Not for this story. In 2010, researchers identified a lysine-like peptide in amaranth grain. Lysine is a 43 amino acid peptide, first discovered in soybeans. It is not a vitamin. It is not a mineral. It is a peptide, a short chain of amino acids with a very specific biological function. What lysine does is this. It enters the cell, it crosses the cell membrane, it travels to the nucleus. It binds to histones, the protein spools around which DNA is wound, and it inhibits a process called histone acetylation. Histone acetylation is one of the ways cells regulate which genes are turned on and which are turned off. In cancer cells, this regulation is broken. Genes that should be silent are active. Genes that should promote controlled death apoptosis are silenced. The cell replicates without limit. Lysine binds to the histones. It blocks the acetylation. It disrupts the replication. It does this selectively. In study after study, lysine showed cytotoxicity against cancer cell lines, but not against normal cells. The specifics, published in peer-reviewed journals over 20 years of research: breast cancer, cell lines, MDA, MB231, and MCF7. Lysine reduced viability in both. It did not affect the viability of non-tumorigenic breast cell line MCF10A. Colon cancer, cell lines HT29, HCT116, RKO, and KM12L4. Lysine induced apoptosis in all four. It did not affect normal human colon fibroblasts, CCD33KO lung cancer, cell line NCIH661, lysine inhibited proliferation. It did not affect bronchial epithelial cell lines BEAS2B or HBE135E6E7. Melanoma, cell line A375, lysine inhibited oncosphere formation, a marker for cancer stem cell activity. The amaranth lysine-like peptide was found to internalize into cell nuclei and inhibit histone acetylation in a manner similar to soybean lysine. Published in 2010 in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, this is a grain available at your grocery store. It contains a peptide that crosses into the nucleus of human cancer cells and disrupts their replication, and it is legal to buy, but illegal to call medicine. Now the story takes a turn that no one, not the Spanish, not the USDA, not the chemical industry predicted. Amaranth uses C for photosynthesis, the same carbon-fixing pathway used by sugarcane and corn. C4 plants are 40% more efficient at converting sunlight into biomass than C3 plants like wheat and rice. They lose less water through transpiration. They thrive in heat, they thrive in drought. In 1977, NASA's Controlled Ecological Life Support System, CELSS, tested amaranth in sealed chambers, simulating conditions for long-duration space missions. Amaranth produced 20% more biomass than wheat under the same conditions. NASA flagged it as a candidate crop for Mars colonization. In 1992, the Rio Earth Summit identified amaranth among crops requiring 40% less water than conventional cereals. The United Nations declared it one of 12 underutilized crops capable of addressing global famine. In 2012, the worst drought in 50 years hit the American Midwest. Corn yields dropped 13%. Amaranth maintained 90% of normal production, using 30% less irrigation water. The plant is designed by 8,000 years of selection and millions of years of evolution to survive conditions that kill everything else. And here is where the story becomes absurd. Palmer amaranth, Amaranthus palmeri, is a wild relative of grain amaranth. Same genus, same family, same survival machinery. Palmer amaranth grows 2 to 3 inches per day. It can reach 6 to 8 feet tall. A single female plant can produce 250,000 seeds. Some studies report up to 1 million seeds per plant. And in the late 1990s, Palmer amaranth in the cotton fields of Georgia did something the chemical industry did not think possible. It evolved resistance to glyphosate. On its own, no genetic engineering, no corporate laboratory. The plant encountered the most widely used herbicide in human history and adapted. Glyphosate-resistant Palmer amaranth has now spread across millions of acres in the American South and Midwest. It suppresses soybean yields by 79%, corn yields by 91%. The Weed Science Society of America estimated in 2016 that uncontrolled weeds, Palmer amaranth, American and Canadian farmers $43 billion in potential yield losses annually. Agencies list it as prohibited. Farmers are instructed to destroy it on site. The same genus, the same family, the same plant, the Aztecs revered as the body of their god. The Spanish burned under penalty of amputation, a noxious weed. There is a reason you were never taught the word amaranth in school. If you call something a weed, you do not have to study it. You do not have to fund it. You do not have to acknowledge that it contains 13.6 grams of complete protein per 100 grams, 5.2% lysine, 95% of your daily iron, a peptide that disrupts cancer cell replication in the lab, and squalene, a compound the cosmetics industry extracts from dead sharks because it did not want to extract it from a plant that costs $4 a pound. There is no patent on amaranth. There never will be. You cannot patent a plant that has been in the public domain for 8,000 years. And a crop that cannot be patented cannot be monetized by the seed industry. A crop that cannot be monetized has no lobby. A crop with no lobby gets no subsidies. A crop with no subsidies gets no research funding. A crop with no research funding stays in the margins, in the ditches, in the cracks, exactly where the Spanish left it. The global wheat market is valued at over $200 billion. The global corn market exceeds $300 billion. These industries have infrastructure, lobbies, subsidies, entire government agencies dedicated to their protection. Amaranth, as of 2025, occupies approximately 2.5 million hectares. Globally, it is valued at $4.8 billion across 92 countries. It is growing, but it is growing despite the system, not because of it. Amaranth grain is available at health food stores across the United States. It is available online. 1 pound costs between $4 and $7. It cooks in 15 to 20 minutes, similar to rice, with a slightly nutty, earthy flavor and a porridge-like consistency. It can be popped like popcorn, toasted in a dry skillet, ground into flour for flatbreads, pancakes, or thickening soups, mixed with wheat flour at a 30% ratio to increase protein and lysine content without altering taste. It grows in most climates. It tolerates poor soil. It tolerates heat and drought. It matures. In 90 to 120 days, seeds are available from specialty suppliers for garden planting. Amaranth leaves, the greens, are edible. They are eaten across Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean under dozens of names: Kalilu, Velita, Thotakura, Bayam. The leaves contain more iron and calcium than spinach. You do not need a prescription. You do not need approval. You do not need a doctor's note. You need $4 and a pot of water. This grain was eaten for 8,000 years. It was one of 3 pillars of the largest pre-Columbian empire on Earth. It was burned by conquistadors, hidden in mountains, classified as a weed, sprayed with poison, and it grew back every single time. 8,000 years, 2 empires, 17 provinces, 20,000 tons, 10,000 hectares burned, 250,000 seeds per plant, 2 to 3 inches per day, 90% yield in drought, 43 amino acids in 1 peptide, 6 cancer cell lines in the lab, 92 countries, $4 a pound. And they still call it pigweed. If this vault opens something, subscribe. The next file is on a root that has been used as medicine for 5,000 years, proven in 9 clinical trials across 6 countries, and matched the most prescribed painkiller in America. The FDA sent a warning letter to anyone who said so. That one is coming next.